you're not happy 50% of the time, that you need to reconsider things because it's not sustainable. You're not going to be happy. Yeah, you're not getting paid less than a Domino's pizza delivery driver. Dr. Chris G. I was a high-earning doctor. Now I'm unemployed, traveling hippie. How did I get here?
Someone who felt stuck or trapped like I was, living a miserable life, thinking that when they make X amount of money, when they get to a certain level in their career, that they're going to be happy. But they keep putting it off and putting it off, thinking that later is the time to do it, when later may never come. So out of all the things in my life, I think my job has brought me the most misery and the most suffering. Being a doctor is one of those jobs which sounds really cool and awesome, but I think the reality of it is very different to what people assume.
Yeah, the reality of medicine is very different from public perception, from what lay people think, what you show on TVs and in movies. But there are also so many different flavors of medicine, and I'm mostly referring to the different specialties within medicine, since the life of a neurosurgeon to that of a family medicine doctor to that of a radiologist is all incredibly different, but also the type of practice that you have. Within those specialties, there are different types of practices, which will also very much change what your stressors and challenges are day to day.
So I studied in the UK. I worked for a couple of years in the NHS. And for those 2 to 3 years that I was working in the NHS, I'd say I was probably at my peak of my misery.
So he says he was working in the NHS in the UK for 2 to 3 years. Now, I've noticed a difference in how people in the UK versus the US talk about medicine. I'm guessing he was still in his training. I forget all the terminology across the pond, but they do essentially 2 years that are like intern year. It's like, think of it as MS4 plus intern year combined, and then they do their specialty training. So it sounds like he was towards the beginning of his residency 2 to 3 years in. And it is not uncommon at all to be unhappy, burnt out, overworked, etc. while you're in residency, and things change when you're an attending physician.
I'm trying to remember why I was so miserable. And I think there were a few reasons. Firstly, the NHS it's a wonderful thing, providing free healthcare to everyone who lives in the UK. But unfortunately, it's so under-resourced, it's so understaffed. It's a beautiful place, but it's a miserable place to work in. In some ways, I was really envious of all my friends who worked in London in the city, and even though they had probably quite poor work-life balances as I did, at least they were being financially rewarded for it. I remember there was times where I was being paid, especially my first year, less than a Domino's pizza delivery driver on the hour.
Okay, yeah, he was definitely still in residency. Yeah, you're not getting paid less than a Domino's pizza delivery driver when you're completed with your training. And that is a common point that is brought up, right? Which is that the pay, like the value that you're providing, even as a trainee after you graduated medical school, you are still not getting paid anywhere close to the amount of value that you provide, which I understand in any business, you have to pay employees less than they are worth. Otherwise, you would go out of business, obviously, right? You need to have some kind of profit, account for other overhead, etc. But it is such a huge gap. Essentially, what these recent medical school grads are doing is very similar to what a mid-level does, but mid-levels, at least in the US, are paid like twice, 2 times, and sometimes even more than residents for doing essentially very similar work. And residents also have greater medical knowledge. So it's not a perfect analogy, but it just shows you how underpaid they are.
This and the fact that I was really overworked, overstressed, emotionally drained, just meant that I was living a life that I really hated. And I just couldn't see myself doing it for the rest of my life. When I looked towards my senior colleagues, they didn't particularly live lives that I wanted to live.
But your senior colleagues are oftentimes still in training and are just a few years ahead of you. And those who are no longer in training, who are now completed with their training, and they're now, I think consultants is what they call them over there, or attendings as we call them here. Those are people that are working in academia. And remember what I was saying earlier. It's not just your specialty, it's also your practice setting. So if you are in academia, your life is going to look different versus if you have a private practice or if you work out in the community.
If I hated my job so much, why didn't I just quit? There's a couple of reasons. There's one, the sunk cost fallacy, where you feel you put so much time and energy into something that you need to continue it. Otherwise, that time will just go to waste. Secondly, people always would say that it gets better and better. Once you get to this certain level in your career, or once you make X amount of money, things will get better. So you work your whole life, and once you've retired, you can then be happy.
You know, when I do these reaction videos, I'm never trying to fully agree or disagree. I'm trying to add my own thoughts and a balanced perspective. So Chris here is coming at it in a very, from one far end, right? And I'm not saying that I disagree with everything he's saying. but you want to always have the context too. And I left in my plastic surgery residency, so I did something very similar to what he did, leaving in the middle of training. And people leave for different reasons. You can learn more about my full story with the whole explanation video linked below. But the important thing I want to point out again is that your life as a trainee is not the same as your life when you're fully trained as a consultant or as an attending.
So I started looking forward towards retirement, but it was so far away, 50 years away. And around this time, I came across a book by Tim Ferriss called The 4 Hour Workweek.
Of course.
Absolutely ridiculous title. No one can work for 4 hours a week. But there were some ideas in there that really kind of changed my perspective on things. And one concept he talks about is, instead of saving it all for the end, taking mini retirements throughout your life instead. And when you think about it, there's no real reason you can't do this. The only difference is you're taking pockets of your money and you're spending them throughout your life rather than spending it all at the end. And not just your money, your time as well. And I guess along those same lines, the patients I met in hospital who worked their whole life and died shortly after they retired. It's not like that just happened once. I have met multiple patients in my life that has happened to. So you could save it for later, but there may never be a later.
This is interesting because I actually have a chronic autoimmune condition that I've been dealing with since I was 18. I'm now 34. And I've been hospitalized. I have experiences with the fragility of life personally, not just as a physician, but also as a patient. And it's very interesting to me how Chris and I have arrived at two different endpoints. I'm not opposed to the idea of mini retirements, but based on my values, I find a lot of meaning and purpose from my work.
So after I finished my couple of years working in the NHS, I finished my foundation years. So if you're in the States, that's similar to your internship years. And I decided I wanted to take a mini retirement in that time. So I spent 6 months traveling Southeast Asia. And honestly, it was one of the happiest periods of my life ever. And I know it sounds super dramatic, but I remember thinking at that time, if I were to suddenly die, I would be able to die without any regrets. I felt like I had lived my life to the fullest and that I had gotten enough out of it. Looking back now, there's definitely a few more things that I need to do, but at that time I was genuinely happy with what I'd achieved. But of course it had to come to an end. The money would run out at some point and I would have to go back to work and earn some more money. So I went back to the UK, I started earning again, I started working as a locum. For those of you who don't know what a locum is kind of like a substitute teacher, but a substitute doctor, where you're filling in roster gaps in hospitals where they're short-staffed.
That's a great way to describe it. I've never heard that before. But yeah, normally locum tenens, you explain it like, oh yeah, you're a traveling doctor, you're kind of filling not a full-time role. Yeah, substitute teacher, but a substitute doctor. That's brilliant.
And I did certainly come back from my travels feeling refreshed. And I had a big realization at this time, which was the best doctors are the happy doctors. The doctors who are enjoying their job, who are enjoying their lives, are the ones that can really show up for their patients, who can have empathy, who can give the best treatment. I'm not saying that miserable or sad doctors can't be good doctors. They certainly can. And I've met many. But in general, the happiest doctors are the best doctors.
And that follows through with any kind of profession. If you are happier and you enjoy your work more, then it is only natural that you will have a higher tolerance for whatever friction you face and whatever bullshit you have to deal with.
When I was doing my locum work back in the UK, I was still very lost. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was a doctor, but I wasn't specializing in anything. So most people go into a training pathway after they've completed their foundation years.
So the equivalent here in the US is that he essentially did intern year, and you can get your license after just your intern year and passing step 3 here in the US. And then you just don't pursue any specialty training. So you can do like urgent care.
The NHS was still a horrible place to work for. Still super under-resourced, still felt super undervalued. But luckily at this time, I had a good friend, one of my best friends actually reach out to me, who was also a doctor and he had been working in Australia. He kept going on about how good it was, the weather, the money, the girls. It was like something from an In-Betweeners movie. And I didn't really have anything else going on, so I made the jump. He got me a job in an emergency department. After starting work in Australia, for some reason, something just shifted. And for the first time, I started actually really enjoying my job. I wasn't crazy about it, but I could see myself doing it. My rule was that as long as I was happy 50% of the time, that was enough. Completely impossible to be happy 100% of the time. It's definitely an attainable goal to be happy 50% of the time. We still need to make room for all the other emotions in life, all the pain and the suffering. But I think 50% of the time is something good to aim for.
Paradoxically, when you actually focus on happiness and try to chase it, it becomes more evasive because by focusing on trying to be happy, you are every moment you are thinking, I need to be happy, I want to be happy, I'm trying to be happy, it is reinforcing the fact that you are not happy. And you can't allow the happiness to just occur naturally.
And I'm not really sure why I enjoyed it so much more in Australia. I think partly it was the respect for doctors in Australia, the respect from the general population, the fact that you're financially compensated for your work.
Let's see how much Australian EM doctors are normally compensated. Yeah, so it looks like Australian doctors are making like twice the amount as UK doctors and significantly more than that if you're doing locums.
You don't feel like you're being put under the gun continuously. Maybe it was even just the lovely sunshine. I don't know, but I really enjoyed it. I was now in a better place. So I continued this for a full year working in the emergency department. I really enjoy working in the emergency department, but at the same time, shift work. Shift work is one of the worst things that you can put your body through, unfortunately. Being sleep deprived, constantly changing your sleep schedule, and I just could not see myself doing it long term.
Dude, my girlfriend's doing this right now as a knock ED nurse. It's not good for your body. It's not good for your health. It is, and it increases rates of burnout.
So I started working towards another thing, which was GP, general practice, or family medicine, you call it in America.
Okay, so that's interesting. He was able to work locums in an emergency department without doing any specialty training. And I guess to go into GP, family med, he would need to do some specialty training, which is interesting. Because here in the US, generally, an emergency department isn't going to hire you if you don't have EM training, even in a locum capacity. And if you're working in primary care, again, generally in most cities, you're going to need to complete a residency for insurance and for these hospitals to want to employ you because they're taking on risk as well, right? Here in the US, you can definitely do urgent care without any specialty training. And I think you can still do primary care like in rural areas where you're not working for some larger hospital group and where they really need doctors. But it's interesting. There's a little bit of a difference in requirements between Australia and here, and also the UK, obviously.
I started working down that path of getting all the prerequisites for GP. So GP in Australia is usually 3 years training, but you can knock off a year of your training if you do certain hospital rotations. So I was doing all these hospital rotations, like pediatrics, general medicine, general surgery, had already done my emergency time, and I did that for a full year. Then I discovered locuming again, but this time locuming in Australia, which was even better money, even more flexibility, and it meant I got to fly around Australia working in different emergency departments across the country. I'd already got a pay rise from moving to Australia, but now my pay as a locum was even more than what it was when I was working as a full-time salaried doctor. In fact, my pay was even more than some consultants in the UK. I was earning more money as a kind of junior doctor who was unspecialized as a locum than a lot of consultants back in the UK. But then again, I noticed something. I noticed I was being sucked down this kind of chasing money, materialistic lifestyle. Having money and earning money was becoming higher and higher up on my agenda. And I became preoccupied with kind of getting up the food chain, jumping back on that treadmill and ultimately joining the rat race again. But one of my favourite quotes from a rapper, of all people, called Lil Dicky, which is, when you be racing them rats, you ain't be making them raps.
Lil Dicky, great taste, professional rapper, awesome song.
He was also part of the corporate world himself. He was working up that food chain. But when you put so much time into your work, you don't have time to do anything else that's important to you. For Lil Dicky, rapping was important to him. And now he's a world famous, amazing rapper. And for me, I wasn't making my raps. I wasn't doing other things that I wanted to do. For example, working out, creating videos like this. Creating videos is what rapping is to Lil Dicky.
So remember, when you're in your training, you're going to have more demanding hours, and it's going to last for a few years, depending on what specialty you go into. It sounds like he was going back into training, was focused on making more money, was working more hours, and then was ultimately getting frustrated that he didn't have enough time on the side, which I totally get. I was there myself because I was doing plastic surgery residency while also building 3 businesses on the side and trying to exercise and balance a relationship and all these things. And I was like, hey, I only got 24 hours in a day. I'm optimizing every minute. So you don't want to go all the way to that extreme because it's not sustainable. You're not going to be happy. But for those who are watching that may be concerned about facing a similar challenge in the future, keep in mind that you ultimately choose what balance you want. I work a lot more than most of my friends and colleagues, but that's because I find a lot of enjoyment from my work. I'm still able to exercise. I do strength training between 90 to 120 minutes 4 times per week, plus I do my zone 2 at least 5 bike rides per week, plus normally one longer 2 to 3 hour bike ride per week. I see my family. I am hanging out with my girlfriend. I go to the racetrack. I literally was just at the racetrack last weekend. You guys can follow my car channel if you want to see more stuff there. And I'm doing these things while also pursuing work. And I'm not focusing on just work at the expense of everything else. But yeah, work is important to me. I want to have an impact. I want to grow my business, etc. So just remember, it's not a binary black and white, yes or no. It is a spectrum, and you get to choose exactly what point on the spectrum do you put your stake in and say, hey, this is where I like to live my life. This is the balance I want. And guess what? You can always pick up that stake and move it either left or right as things change as you get older.
So I had met my fiance a couple years prior to this, and the first thing that we bonded over was a mutual love for travel. And right from the beginning, we knew that we wanted to travel together. But I started honoring something that had been super important to me, which was making these videos. And I'm so grateful to have found someone who has the same values as me, because we've been able to do this trip and I've been able to make these videos. So I'm kind of honoring 2 things that are really important to me at the same time.
I think that's awesome.
And I'm not really making any money from these videos, but I really feel a sense of direction. I know exactly what I want to do, and that is to specialize in some kind of preventative and lifestyle medicine, and at the same time work online, make videos, help people through this medium.
It's like a hippie version of Peter Attia. So for those who don't know, Peter Attia actually left his general surgery residency. I believe it was I think it was in the middle of his 3rd year, right? And he never completed his residency. He never did surgical oncology, but he instead worked at McKinsey for a couple of years and then started his own longevity practice. And now, many years later, he started creating his The Drive podcast, which I've subscribed to. I think it's an excellent podcast. And he publishes various videos about this as well. So there's clearly a market and a need for that. People are finding so much joy and value from consuming high quality content about longevity, health optimization, etc. Because for most of us, health is our number 1 top priority, as it should be. And to be able to combine that with your other hobbies of traveling and such, I think that is awesome. It sounds like he is definitely on the right path, given his values and his priorities.
And I don't think I would have ever come to this conclusion if I hadn't taken my mini retirements throughout my life. Just having space away from work, space to think and reflect on what I actually want. If you're working 80% of your life, you focus all your time and energy into something, it's hard to assess what you really want. You only really can tell through having empty space. And a lot of people would think this is absolutely ridiculous, especially people from my parents or our parents' generation. You go to work, you work for your whole life, and then you retire at the end. Having a mini retirement throughout your life is just unheard of for a lot of them. And thankfully, my parents are quite accepting and supportive of our decision to do this, probably because they are big travelers themselves, even if it is just in short stints in small holidays. But you have to understand, we can't follow the blueprint of our parents anymore.
I actually see these extended holidays occurring more commonly when people are in their 20s, right? When people get to their 30s, amongst my friends, for a lot of them, there are family obligations. They have a partner, they have kids, or soon to have kids. If they party too much in their 20s, they think, hey, I really got to get my shit together if I want to build this future. Now I'm in my 30s, I'm no longer just a young kid. This kind of thing isn't the norm by any means, but it's not also terribly uncommon. One thing to keep in mind too is finances. So if you're in the US, you probably are graduating from medical school with significant amounts of student loans, student debt. And to take 6 months or a year off while you have that debt accruing interest doesn't make any sense. You're also going to have to keep making payments during that time too. Keep in mind that finances are also a huge part of being able to do this. Now for me, I did pay for my own college, my own med school, and as a result, I had to take out some small amount of loans, even though I earned some merit scholarships that covered all my tuition and such. I never was really prioritizing a mini retirement anyways, but even if I was, I simply wouldn't be able to based on the financial situation. Also, just growing up and even actually in my young adulthood and my early 20s, there was a lot of issues around living situations and how additional money would help that. And they say money doesn't buy happiness, but in what context? When I was making 60K a year and I was in a living situation that I was not happy in, and there was a lot of pain and just a lot of issues there, to then making many times more than that and then moving out and having my own spot and having my own bathroom. For those with IBD, you guys understand how important that is. And not having such toxicity around me, yeah, I was way happier. And it was because I worked hard on my businesses and built them and was providing value out there in the world that I was able to get into a more comfortable living situation. It is incredibly natural for humans to need to push up against something. So I'm thinking back to an acquaintance of mine who had a perfect upbringing and just like absolutely picture perfect, safe, quiet, incredible neighborhood, a lot of support from the family, just like parents were super cool too, like incredible. But even this person, as a human, needed to create something to push against, some kind of struggle. That's just natural human psychology. For most of us, without becoming a monk, we're not getting to the point of,
I have no problems, I'm Zen, things are great.
You always have something that you're pushing up against, some kind of challenge, some kind of obstacle. And for this acquaintance of mine, it was some very small stuff that I was like, wait, seriously, that's the big problem? That to other people that have bigger problems in their lives seem so trivial, but it was real to them. So when you're watching other people, whether it's Chris or me or whoever else on YouTube and such, when you're hearing these stories, keep in mind the context. Where are you in relation to them? What is the greater context around your situation that then informs what options are available and what you can and should do with your life? Don't think that just because I quit plastics or because Chris here had his own path and wants to do mini retirements, that it's right for you as well.
And before I go on any further, I want to acknowledge my privilege and express my gratitude for my privilege.
There we go. I didn't want to use the word because it can be a little bit polarizing to some people. But yeah, here we go. Kudos.
I'm lucky to have been born in a country, born to the right parents, gone to the right school, have the money to afford a higher education degree, be in a situation where I can do something like this. And I'm fully aware that there's people who are watching this video, people who live in a less developed country, people who are from the Philippines or any of these other countries that I've visited, and they would never be able to do anything like this simply because they're living paycheck to paycheck and they would never be able to accrue enough savings to just leave their job. Or there's the mother of two children, the single mother of two children who has mouths to feed, and she can't take the risk of pursuing her passions because if she doesn't work and earn money, her kids don't eat. So I appreciate that I'm privileged to be doing something like this.
And there's levels to this. Being born in the UK or the US or many of these, amazing countries that are not perfect, but highly developed to give you all these opportunities is such a huge leg up over those who are not. And even being within those countries, there are different levels that are going on. Trust me, there's a huge spectrum here. And again, I don't know Chris's situation. I'm not speaking to Chris, but in general, keep in mind that even if you are born in the US, in the UK, wherever, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same privilege as other people born in that country. And I'm not talking about necessarily your gender or your race or ethnicity. I'm just talking about the hard facts of like, how safe was your upbringing? Do you have stability at home? Did you have financial resources from your parents? Did you have support from them? Did you go to a good school? These are all things that stack up and hugely change the opportunities that are available to you. But it's just an icky thing to talk about because it is like, what are you going to do? You can't really change it. You're just given the cards that you're dealt and you got to play the best hand you can. And even in the US, the starting hand can be insanely different.
Not everyone can. But you have to ask yourself, if you're unsure if you're one of these people, is it just another bullshit obstacle that you're putting in front of yourself? Or is it actually true? Is you taking a risk of moving to a job that you want to try or going traveling or starting a business that you've wanted to start? Is that really going to put you and your loved ones at risk?
So 2 things here. Number 1, be mindful of your own risk tolerance. If you are a high risk tolerant person, then doing something like this will be more palatable to you. If you're a low risk tolerant person, it's going to be too scary, right? Now, to get further clarity and understand in a more logical way what the pros and cons are and the possible downsides versus just, giving into that fear cycle, I recommend Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise that he talks about in his TED Talk. I followed the fear setting exercise myself when it came time to leave plastic surgery because obviously very big decision, can't ever go back to plastics, just given what the specialty is and how hard it is to get in. They would always have a huge line of qualified applicants who never quit, before they would take you again. So very high risk in this way. But to then understand the risk, the possible upside and downside of both staying and leaving, you get so much more clarity when you have a structured, like the spreadsheet that shows you everything that you can then look at once and mull it over and have greater clarity and insight. Link to that below.
And it's not just about traveling or not working. It's about taking the leap to do something that you really want to do, that you're passionate about. Trying something that you don't have time for because your job takes up 80% of your life. And if you're genuinely happy in your job or your life situation, good for you. You've won the lottery. If you're slightly unsure, if you're not happy 50% of the time, you need to do some serious thinking and reflecting.
There is unfortunately a very high proportion of med students, residents, and attendings who are unhappy with their current stage. And I'm actually working on a project that is going to be addressing unhappy med students, residents, and attending physicians that either need to reconfigure things in their existing stage of training as a med student, resident, and so on, or maybe shift specialties or switch practice types, or even leave medicine altogether. So if that's something that you're interested in, we're building a community around this. Check the link below. There's going to be a wait list. And I'm super excited about it because it's a huge project that we're undertaking for 2025. And I think it's going to add a lot of value. There's a lot of pain out there, unfortunately. And after talking to dozens and dozens of med students, residents, attendings who I've done these consulting calls with and doing all these reaction videos, and based on all these touch points, there's so much nuance and it's hard to even explain. How do you approach something that's so complicated? Because these are people's lives, and it's every single person has multiple different complexities and values and needs and wants and challenges and obstacles and things they like and don't like that are different from someone else. And anyways, I'm just super excited about this because I think it's going to add a lot of structure, a lot of clarity to those who need the help to get to a happier place. Now, going back to what Chris was saying about if you're not happy 50% of the time, that you need to reconsider things. Number one, when you are younger, it's a lot easier because you don't have as many responsibilities on your plate and you don't feel that time pressure of, hey, clock's ticking, I'm already in my 30s, oh my God, what am I going to do? So if it feels challenging right now, and let's say you're late teenager or you're in your 20s, remember that it will only feel more challenging in the future, all other things being equal, because of course you're going to find exceptions to that rule. Let's say, maybe right now you're taking care of a sick loved one and you feel tied down, but maybe in a few years you'll have more freedom, as an example. But the other thing is to be careful about what you make your job. If you take your passion and you make it your career, you may lose the magic, you may lose the spark. And I've talked about this on my car YouTube channel because cars are my longest existing, most intense, obsessive passion. Some of my earliest memories, 3 years old, around cars. And from drawing cars to building model cars to RC cars to drifting to racetrack to doing car reviews right now. I lose money with every single car review that I do. We're almost at break even, not quite, but I still do it because it brings me so much joy. And I've met dozens of other car reviewers at these various events and such. And just like me, they're also obsessed with cars. It's their passion. But a very high proportion, an extremely high proportion, almost all of those who made it their full-time gig, especially if they've been doing it for more than a few years, they talk about how they need to remind themselves not to be cynical, not to let the passion die out, because it is so easy to just focus on what's going to pay the bills. Oh yeah, sure, I'm going to go review that NPC mobile versus the sports car that I love because it's going to get more views and I got to, pay the bills, put food on the table. I don't ever want that. With my car channel, I always want it to be the side hobby. Even if the YouTube channel was blowing up and I didn't have to worry about money, I still wouldn't ever make it my full-time gig. First of all, I love what I'm doing at Med School Insiders and with this YouTube channel and speaking to medical trainees. I really feel for medical trainees. I was a medical trainee. A lot of my closest friends were medical trainees at one point. A lot of them are now attending physicians. But these are such well-intentioned, good-meaning, hardworking, intelligent people that oftentimes need help. So obviously, I love the impact that I'm having here. But the other price that I would pay if I made cars my full-time gig is that the passion would slowly get drained from that and would start feeling more tedious. I would have stress around it. Right now, when I watch car videos on YouTube, it's so enjoyable. I would lose that outlet, and that would be terrible. So be mindful. Turning your passion into your career sounds great, but there are these costs that most people don't talk about. And what many people find is that by keeping it a side hustle, a side hobby, You got to keep that joy alive.
But the most important first step into a healthy, happier life is finding the right job. And just quickly, if you're worried about what future employers might think in an interview when they ask you what you did when in your time off, whether that was traveling, just tell them, I wanted to give something everything I've got, and it didn't work out. That's fine. And if they still don't give you the job because of your little break in your CV, ask yourself, would you even want to be working for that person anyway? It's so important to not be miserable. And I can say with certainty that I'm now not miserable more than 50% of the time. There's a double negative. I can say with certainty, I'm happy more than 50% of the time. And even if I don't make it to retirement, touch wood, that I will, at least I've tasted it. I could literally die now without any regrets.
Chris makes some good points. What I want to add is that you don't follow your passion to then get into the career. You can build the passion by focusing on something that speaks to your strengths, speaks to your interests, and maybe you don't absolutely love right now, but as you apply yourself, as you get better, as you improve the craft, you can build and grow a passion. And the other thing is, I don't believe that as humans, we're happy without purpose. For some people, purpose comes from their children, right? For many of us, myself included, purpose comes from my work. And it looks like Chris has found purpose through a different kind of work. He wants to do longevity and educate with his YouTube videos. That is a kind of work that may not quite feel like work for him, but he's still being driven by this purpose. So I think what many people succumb to is this lie, this myth that if you're unhappy in your job, all you have to do is get to the point where you don't have to work, save a bit of money, go to a cheap country, and just retire there. You're going to be happy. And you're going to find that you don't feel like your life has as much purpose. As humans, we need some kind of purpose and something to keep us pushing forward towards something. And there are also some differences there between men and women, the psychology, but that's for another time.
Except there are a couple more things on my bucket list. Making a YouTube video which gets 1 million views, and one of those is being a dad.
Dude, it's so funny, the whole, like, we shoot for these metrics. I've made several videos at this point that are more than 1 million views. And the first time you hit it, you're like, yeah, let's go. But now it just becomes the new benchmark, the new baseline that you need to now beat. Okay, now I need to get 2 million. Now I need to get 3 million. Now I need to do this once a month or once every 6 months, whatever it is. It's so funny how metrics are a slippery slope.
And I really want to share this quote with you from Naval Ravikant. He's an angel investor. He's also a huge forward thinker. And he said, the only real test of intelligence is getting what you want out of life.
There's another one he has, which is like, if you're so smart, then why aren't you happy? Fucking cuts deep, right?
I know so many smart people, especially going to medical school, especially some of my colleagues, who are miserable, who are not getting what they want out of life. And it's not because they're not intelligent, they obviously are, but they're either very risk averse or just afraid to step outside the box and do something different because someone else might be judging them. They are probably even just judging themselves.
Most people that go into medicine are more risk averse than normal. It just attracts that type of person to the profession because it has such stability, such a known outcome as long as you put in the work. And speaking of work, there's a lot of upfront work that goes into it. So it attracts a certain kind of personality. Oftentimes, we tend to overestimate the risk of something and we psych ourselves out. But there's also nothing wrong with a person saying, hey, I'm risk averse and I want to do medicine because I don't like taking risk. And it adds excess stress and excess anxiety to my life. And I'm just going to do it the easy way. That's fine too. Know thyself.
There's 2 types of prison in this world. There's a physical prison, and there's something much, much worse, which is a mental prison, which I was in for a long time. So many people are unknowingly shackled to a life they hate and are miserable because of this. But here's the good news. You have the key.
Chris, really enjoyed your video. Super cool, thought-provoking. I love what you're doing. And my friends, let me know what you think with the comment down below, and I'll see you all in that next one.